Today I'd like to talk about writing the scripture of myself, because I want to write a scripture for myself that is free from attachment, especially attachment to Dharma. We are all here to cultivate our minds, uncover our true nature, and discover the essential Dharmas. But where are those Dharmas? In this red book? Or in me, Sean, a reverend? Or in my finger, pointing 일원상? Or in that 일원상, which symbolizes truth? After 49 years of his edification, Shakyamuni Buddha said, "I have not spoken a single Dharma. So, is there any Dharma we can attain?" When I was young, I felt guilty about having desires and wanted to be free of them. Actually, I even desired not to be desirous. Also, I wanted to have a flawless one mind, but then I could not move on because I was so attached to this idea of having one mind. It was impossible while being confined by my attachment to Dharma. It is true that scriptures and practices are merely the means to reach enlightenment. But if you believe that they are the only way, the ultimate way, and cling to the Dharma itself, or get restricted by the Dharma, we call it bondage to Dharma. In Korean, 법. This means being obsessed with the fixed ideas of practice, such that even if you have an affinity to Dharma or to a teacher, you would still fail to understand or use it properly. In the scripture, the founding master said, "The ancient scriptures are like ready-to-wear clothing, which is difficult to fit everyone's body. But what is spoken by the mouth and received by the mind is like wearing individually tailored clothing, which fits every person's body perfectly. How could the practice of cultivating the mind according to dharmas that fit each individual's capacities and situations possibly be compared to practicing according to those ancient set scriptures?" When enlightened teachers communicate the Dharma, they do so without fixed answers. They give us different answers to the same question according to the time, place, or state of the person. The phrase spoken by the mouth and received by the mind, 구전심수 in Korean, references a teacher's vast and endless devices to cultivate the mind, not just in a single way, but in various ways that fit each of our capacities, just like individually tailored clothing. Certainly, this cannot be compared to set written scripture. The third head Dharma master of Won Buddhism, Master Daesan, said this in regard to the expression spoken by the mouth and received by the mind. "Sheep eat grass, completely digest it, and then produce milk. What a marvelous thing! The grass itself is not the marvelous thing. What is important is digesting the grass completely. People will be greatly moved when you give to them only the Dharma that you have received deeply into your own heart." So the key is how you yourself have received the Dharma. However, we sometimes think that the grass has some mysterious power and we become attached to it, bondage to Dharma. This principle can be applied to our practice. Years ago, chanting helped me reclaim my calm, ever-alert true nature, even more so than seated meditation. Then, should I tell you that because chanting worked well for me, it is the only way for you to reach enlightenment? Seated meditation is one of the crucial practices. Does this mean that those who cannot sit cannot practice? Will they never find a settled mind? Reverend Wonggong always says, she is not giving extra credit for sitting long hours. As you know, you can meditate sitting in a chair, standing, walking, or lying down. What does matter is that you do it, maybe only for 3 or 5 minutes. What about Hadu or Koan meditation, which is the practice of contemplating a pithy and profound passage over and over during your entire meditation? Self-inquiry and gaining wisdom are valuable, but we must be careful not to burn our brains in contemplation. Ancient Buddhism started from one common root, but over time it became more complex and fragmented into various divisions, with each sect focusing only on certain practices. In Won Buddhism, we have many ways in which we approach practice. We don't want to force anyone to use a single methodology. We want practitioners to have access to many methodologies, as long as we practice with sincerity and dedication. Even though we may enter through different doors, we will come out here, right in the middle of the circle. One circle, true nature, one mind. From the passage above, we can see Master Sotaesan's confidence and compassion. After his enlightenment, he found that the Dharma was already there within Buddhism. But the teachings were complicated and inaccessible to most people. He wanted all of us to reap the benefit of this incredible wisdom. So he tailored it according to the situations of everyday life. In life, we become attached to many things, but even if we find a certain practice or dharma helpful to us, we should not become confined by it. So when I encounter some problems, I ask myself, how would Master Sotaesan handle this? I want to be careful that I don't become dogmatic and somehow present this scripture as the only way. Some practitioners might claim a certain practice is the best and foremost way. They may say things like, if you don't do a mindfulness checklist, you are not practicing right. Sometimes I sense in others and in me, in myself, a feeling of do it this way or you're wrong. From this dogmatic mindset, we will advocate for our own way without hesitation until everyone is persuaded to comply with our beliefs. Even if such dogmatism creates discord or conflict, I can justify it as acceptable collateral damage and deceive myself about the nature of this harsh fundamentalism. I hope that I will not fall into such self-righteousness. There is an old saying, once the river is crossed, abandon the raft. Imagine we took a raft to cross the river. After getting to the other shore, would you then carry that raft on your back or leave it behind? Another saying is, let go of the cliff. What am I clinging to? My self-identity, possessions, relationships, or what I believe to be the right way or the truth? I'm so afraid to let those go because it feels like I'm losing myself. And if I do let go, I think I may die. Am I believing that the idea of self or the right dharma is who I am? Then who is I? Is that truly me? So, get your hands off the cliff. Boldly let go. It is true that on this journey, scripture and practice are essential ways to cultivate our minds. But there is no single practice embodying the absolute way, which we must hold on to. Our goal is to follow the original intention of the dharmas and to make use of those techniques to become free. So let us open our minds and receive dharmas into our hearts without any attachment. As we experience and practice the dharmas in our daily lives, may we go beyond the written scriptures and write or find a lively scripture of our own. Thank you.
My name is Patty Daniel, and I've been practicing at this temple for more than 15 years now. And for many of these years, if not most, I've been puzzling over and thinking about my topic today, the power of equanimity. In both ancient and contemporary Buddhism, there are many scriptures and teachings that center around peace of mind and equanimity. They usually talk about how to achieve equanimity, how to cultivate it, which practices seem to produce it, and how deep insights and wise decisions can flow from it. But what is it really, and why do we want it? I've always resisted the idea of equanimity. Sometimes I feel like Buddhism is asking me to become an emotional zombie, to not react, to not feel, to always somehow rise above the nitty-gritty of everyday life. And even though I understand intellectually that this is a mischaracterization of the teachings, I still resist the notion that we can or should avoid emotional upheavals. Anyone who has ever fallen in love would probably agree that the emotional high was worth the heartbreak that may well have eventually followed. I love the emotional highs of life, in spite of the fact that I fully recognize that the emotional highs are pretty well even with the emotional lows. Even so, I welcome the highs. I find them energizing, exciting, and motivating. They push me to move, to explore, to experiment. So I chose this topic today for my talk in hopes of going a little deeper into my understanding of equanimity. I think the ancient Greek Stoic philosophers may well have been the first in the West to write about the idea of equanimity. And ironically, in the popular imagination today, the Stoics are often thought of as hard-hearted, overly controlled, grim, humorless, and unfeeling. One of the guiding principles of the early Stoic philosopher Zeno, and we're talking like 4th century BCE, one of his guiding principles was known as apatheia, which refers to a state of mind in which one is not disturbed by the passions. The word apatheia is sometimes translated as indifference, since the modern English word apathy is derived from it, but scholars of Greek translate it as equanimity. The Stoics believed that the practice of virtue is enough to achieve human flourishing, that a life spent practicing certain virtues in everyday life, such as courage and living in accordance with nature, that these virtues will bring happiness. Along with the Aristotelian ethics, the Stoic tradition forms one of the major foundations for what is known as virtue ethics. It emphasizes that because virtue is sufficient for happiness, a wise person is one who is emotionally resilient, that virtue stems from tranquility of mind and freedom from excessive emotional states. Thus, in their view, apatheia, or equanimity, is our very foundation for happiness. In the world of psychology, equanimity is viewed as mental balance, the ability to experience our trials and tribulations without constantly striving to change our external circumstances. This is not to say that equanimity can replace making practical decisions to help us deal with our difficulties, but that a state of calmness and balance is what gives rise to the best decisions. In a blog called Mind Owl, a post by psychologist Felipe Bastos states that equanimity is a fundamental skill related to self-awareness. However, because of its association with calmness and reduced reactivity, it is sometimes confused with suppression of feelings, apathy, passivity, or a lack of expansiveness. Rather, he says, it's really about being free from judgments, prejudices, and disturbances, and about not fixating on our thoughts and feelings. In other words, when emotions arise, we recognize them without suppression or denial or distracting ourselves from them, but neither do we attach to them. Both over-suppression and over-identification with our feelings can be avoided through cultivating a more balanced state of equanimity. Mr. Bastos goes on to say that some people, like me, might worry that equanimity of mind may lead to reduced levels of energy and focus, as well as an unwillingness to engage with the world around you. But quite the opposite is true. Equanimity frees the mind to be more engaged with the world by developing a more peaceful mind and by practicing acceptance of the world as it is. When we stop resisting, we have more energy available for engaging in positive pursuits, and we can feel empowered and effective when responding to situations as they arise. In the world of meditation, the concept of equanimity is frequently referenced in relation to the mental stability and composure achieved by deep meditation. Sharon Salzberg, one of the co-founders of the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts, has said that equanimity is the mental state that results when a person has wisdom, perspective, and enough experience to fully know that no emotional upheaval lasts forever. She says it's a mistake to think that equanimity is detached and passive. Rather, it is a realization that there are other options and possibilities, that you're not stuck in a difficult situation. In most branches of Buddhism, the concept of equanimity is a fundamental principle founded on the concept that nothing is permanent or certain. Understanding and true acceptance of the inherent impermanence of all things in the universe becomes the path to equanimity and happiness. In Won Buddhism, our essential dharmas of daily practice, they're all in our meditation booklets. Our essential dharmas begin with the mind is originally free from disturbance, but disturbances arise in response to sensory conditions. Let us restore the equanimity of our true nature by letting go of disturbances. There are 9 essential dharmas of daily practice, and they're basically an encapsulation of the doctrinal chart in the front of the Red Book. And though they are entirely interdependent and equally important, I can't help but wonder if our founding teacher, Master Sote-san, didn't put the practice of developing equanimity first for a reason. Dr. Bongkil Chung, a professor, scholar, and ordained minister in Won Buddhism, wrote a translation of the writings of Master Chongsan, who was our second head Dharma master. In a lengthy introduction to his translation, he makes an interesting point. He states that Master Chongsan suggested that a necessary precondition for a perfect life is the cultivation of equanimity. Dr. Chung goes on to say, quote, Equanimity entails a radical impartiality and indifference based on a sense of emptiness in the Buddhist sense of the word, and also on emancipation or freedom based on an understanding of basic existential and metaphysical principles. While we could spend a lot of time on this concept of emptiness, suffice it to say that it underlies the ability to let go of grasping and clinging, especially to our emotional states. Equanimity allows for open-hearted acceptance, followed by letting go. Sometimes equanimity is mistaken for passivity or indifference, but it's not the same. Equanimity calls for engaging with life. Passivity and indifference are forms of giving up. So how do we cultivate equanimity? Well, there are practical things we can do, such as maintaining our physical health, especially with exercise, good nutrition, getting adequate sleep, and limiting our news consumption. But mainly we cultivate equanimity by making the effort to see life as it is, and by being totally present in our daily activities as well as our meditation practice. We cultivate equanimity when we cultivate our wisdom and virtue. When we see that Buddha image everywhere, in everyone and everything. When we experience timeless, placeless Zen. And when we dedicate ourselves to daily meditation. All these things will bring us the power of equanimity. I'd like to end with a quote from Master Sotasan. He says, "It is not my instruction to have you eliminate by force your feelings of joy or anger, sorrow or happiness. Rather, I urge you to exercise your free frame of mind without constraint by applying joy, anger, sorrow, and happiness properly, according to time and place, only making sure that you do not diverge from the middle way." Well, wow, I guess Master Sotasan is not asking me to become an emotional zombie after all. I love the writings of Master Sotasan, and yes, they bring me joy. They are permeated with sound advice, deep understanding of the human condition, and essential kindness. I will be forever grateful for them. Thank you for listening, and may the rest of your day be filled with equanimity.